In this second episode of Spirit of Adventure, I am talking to Rodger Baker. On our special invitation, he and his team was visiting the club last September. Rodger is a vice president of the world's leading Geopolitical Intelligence Platform based in Austin, Texas, USA. Rodger's adventure began when he discovered his passion more than 20 years ago by entering to the small yet unknown company. To deliver custom reports for clients, each project requires from him a profound analysis by using multidisciplinary knowledge such as political studies, history, geography, or even biology.
So my background is not really in geopolitics. My background is in biology and marine science. And then I had also spent a year teaching in Korea. And when I came back to the States, I was invited to come over and join Stratfor as it was first starting up as a company after it had been a research center at Louisiana State University.
Why this shift?
Yeah, basically it's nepotism. My brother helped to found the company. Dr. Friedman, who founded the company, I had known for several years. And I actually, at one point, I had done a summer job helping do research for one of his books. So it was supposed to be a short-term work opportunity, but it really did prove to be a very addicting type of place to work.
You can apply some experience you have in biology and military services to this job you're doing today?
I think there's lots of ways that it applies. One, I mean, right after 9/11, all the questions about anthrax and things like that, I actually know what a gram-negative and a gram-positive bacteria are. That made it really easy, right? I had, you have some element when you get an engineer in some place, they have things, and we've actually since that time added into the company people who are specifically science and technology background to be able to help with that. But also, I think that biology and the hard sciences bring a different way of looking at problems than social sciences do. In the case of my background in biology, it's about observing, making a hypothesis, and then trying to test the hypothesis, and usually trying to test to see if you can make it false, if you can break it, right? And I found with a lot of people out of political science, sometimes they have a tendency just to take a theory and try to push it on top of things. And so by already being predisposed to be challenging theories, I think it was a useful element. It also allowed me coming in not to be too cluttered with preconceived notions. I was able to kind of build up a knowledge base from the bottom up in the new methodology that I was being introduced to.
What kind of things you have to analyze? What kind of, let's say, aspects of the problem you consider to apply to take the final outcome, the final analysis?
It's extremely different depending upon the case study, but the two underlying principles that we use is geopolitics, which is a way of looking top down. It's a way of trying to understand the world and why the world is shaped the way it is. Why do different cultures and societies act in the way that they do? How does that still play into the way in which countries interact with each other, subnational groups, things of that sort? And that sometimes you have to dig down into understanding resources, understanding topography, understanding history, the way in which a political system evolved over time and how it has the tools to reach into its society or reach into action. There's a lot of detail. The other half that we use, though, is intelligence. And in the traditional sense of intelligence, not in the put on a tuxedo with a wetsuit and sneak in somewhere kind of thing, but more like how do I look at a question and disassemble it into its subcomponents, right? And then how would I target where each of those subcomponents are going to get me that piece of information? So intelligence is that bottom-up way of really, really teasing out, not trying to say, well, let me just get the answer, right? Which is, I think, one of the problems we have in the way people do research today is they usually just go in and type a quick word into the search engine and hope that the answer comes out. And the reality is, to find it, you need to start breaking it apart into smaller and smaller pieces and then target those smaller pieces. And then we bring the two of them together. And then finally, I think it's really important, particularly when working for customers, is you have to understand the customer first. It's not a valuable outcome if I don't understand the customer and if I don't understand what I already know and what they already know. And in the end, my job is to tell them what they need to know and convince them it's what they wanted to know. And sometimes they're not even sure what they need to know when they come to us.
Is your passion and hobby?
This has become my passion and hobby, but it's not my only passion and hobby. But it is something that there's no end to it. So unless you're passionate about it, it's very hard to stay in this field because the world continues to move. It's always happening. Things are always going on. I can be on vacation and then get a call and I'm back working right away. And the North Koreans are consistently testing missiles when I'm supposed to be sleeping, so I get woken up. But it has to be a passion because you have to love the study of people and love the study of the world and love the starting to discern the little pieces and pick them apart. But I like other things too. I mean, I love travel. I still have a passion for biology and the sciences. So sometimes in this job, the great thing is if I go someplace, I may go for business meetings and then I'll have half a day and I'll go find the park or the mountain or the beach and I'll be able to sort of blend the two together and still keep up on both.
I didn't see in any university the program Geopolitical Studies. So how do you train yourself or you are just a pioneer on this?
So geopolitics itself is actually a very old field, but it's not really taught so much anymore. And when it is, it's usually taught as this is why you shouldn't use it. It's been tainted by the German application in World War II. It's been tainted by the connection to realism in American foreign policy that some people consider to be a negative in the modern world. I think what keeps you becoming better and better is you have to read a lot of history. You have to read a lot of fiction, whether it's science fiction or whether it's the fiction of different countries. Because in the end, it really is the study of the human condition. And fiction, literature, music, food, poetry, it sounds a little odd, but those are important parts of it. Being able to taste a place, being able to smell a place, being able to kind of spend time with no agenda, just to sort of get the feel. I had a former coworker who from the Soviet Union originally, and he used to say one of the most important things to do when you go to a new place is to find a relatively busy corner, sit down at the cafe, and just watch people all day. And try to discern the patterns, see what the pattern of that place is like. So I think there's a lot of things that you can do to keep up on it and never try to lock into one thing. When I read, I try to keep one book on fiction, one book on history, one book on science or technology, and I'm reading them all about the same time, a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit here, a little bit there. And they start to reinforce each other before I get bored with any of them.
What's your first thing in the morning you do?
The first thing I do in the morning is check my email. It's a horrible thing to say, but we have people sending in information from all over the world 24 hours a day. So the first thing I'm trying to do is get caught up on what are the things that I missed during that excessively short period of time in which I actually slept, and so that I'm aware and I'm knowledgeable in what's going on. And then I try to just take a break from that for a minute.
And the last thing in the day?
Is read my email. I think I'm addicted to email. But it is to look. Actually, I usually try to end my day rather than just reading email and rather than just doing work in something a little more casual, in reading a book or in going out for a bike ride or sitting on the rowing machine or just something that's a little different that at least creates some break from the work and lets me relax a little bit in my head.
But you converted yourself into co-founder of Stratfor.
In some ways, when the company started, it was very small. So those of us who were there right at the beginning defined how it would develop and how it would evolve. In many ways, the methodologies that we use today, we were still working through and we were still trying to see, well, how would you take some of these concepts and actually apply them to business cases, apply them to understanding the structure of the world, and apply them in ways that people can use them, instead of just in ways either that were beneficial for shaping broad-based foreign policy or understanding things. And so I think in that way, there's some element of I wouldn't necessarily call myself a co-founder, but certainly helping to play that role in really ground testing what we were doing, refining it, adjusting it, and changing it around.
How do you see those 20 years now?
Well, I think the one thing I would say is that that we've been around for 20 years suggests that our initial concept that there was value still in geopolitics applied to business and applied to even normal people who just want to understand the world better, that there truly is a value because we're still here. Right? Other types of companies that tried to start up in a new field or things don't make it through because the market isn't right. But there is something there, I think, that has retained a sense of usefulness and a way of looking at the world that isn't ideological in the sense of trying to just shape things into how I want to see them, and that isn't very narrowly focused. And today more than ever, when we started, the collection of information was the difficult part. Getting information was very hard. It was the early days of the internet. There was no Google, right? There were no iPhones. This was a very early time in the mid-90s when you think about the speed and pace of technological change and information availability. Now there's too much information, right? The information is everywhere, but discerning the value of information is excessively difficult because the cost of production of information has dropped to almost zero. It's not like the old days where you had to have a printing press and a distribution network and things of that sort. So I think that the thing that I've learned a lot is how do I create a way to sift rapidly through an amount of information that's clearly much too large to absorb and work through, and do it in a way that helps me identify what's significant versus what's just merely important.
What's more important for you, the business as a business or giving people information?
So is my boss around? I mean, for me personally, it really is about sharing information. That said, I can't do this unless the business survives as a business. And I do think that there is a value in the business. If I wanted to do this on my own, if I wanted to leave, I've had coworkers who have left and started their own firms, whether for speaking or things like that. And they continue to do this. But in a different place. But I also feel an attachment to the company. I've been there for 20 years. I was there just as it was starting up. Most of my life, in some ways, has been connected to this company. So I really do have strong feelings about the company itself as well. But I think when you have the opportunity to take things that you've worked through and you finally figured out and sorted out and you share them with people, and it helps them see things in a different light, in a different way, in a way that perhaps they weren't able to discern it before, there's something very rewarding in that it doesn't hurt to have a paycheck also, though. But there is something very rewarding in having that experience.
Your team of almost 100 employees, do you have any special corporate structure on this, or they're same passion people of digging deep to understand things?
It's going to be a variety of people within there. In the analysis and collections and research team in particular, it's some people who are very passionate about the tiny details, and those are the people you work with if you're working on big picture issues. That person works on the tiny details and tests and challenges your big picture issues. There's some people who you just don't want to bother with all the tiny details, right? It's how do I look at the way in which they all interconnect? How do I step back from it? And so we try to find people who have these differing viewpoints, differing backgrounds, different experiences, different education, different countries and languages that they've come from, and different pieces of passion, but everyone has to have a passion for something. Because again, it's particularly as we now also focus a lot on the publication, it never ends, right? I write an article, I write and figure something out, but the world continues to move. So unless you're really driven by desiring to constantly know and understand and ideally to see ahead of what actually happens, it's very hard to keep up with it.
Your kids are going to work in geopolitical?
Yeah, my son will never go to work in geopolitics. He's going to computer science. I think people don't always follow the path of their parents. His least favorite subject was history. His favorite subject was math. So it's not quite the same as my path. He has recently, though, done some work with the company in helping to work on ways to create interactive graphics. So he took some of his computer skills, came in and joined us for the summer during school break, and was able to apply them to something that maybe he wasn't passionate about geopolitics, but he could apply it in there.
Okay. Thank you very much for joining us here in Barcelona, the sunny Barcelona today. And we have one meeting more with members, and I hope you enjoy.
Well, thank you for having me here. This has been great.
Thank you very much.